Hi, my name is Sarah Gale, Membership and Events Manager at Laguna Art Museum. You're about to experience the virtual tour of California Cool Art Auction 2021 featuring art historian Dr. Julia Friedman. This tour is made possible by our major event sponsors, Platinum sponsors Jane and Joe Hanauer and Laguna Beach Books, Lou and Laura Roll, Kristen and Stephen Samuelin, and Lee Weaver and Hilton Weinberg, as well as our gold sponsors, Donnie Crevier and Lori Kraus, Carla and Jeff Meeberg, Thomas B. Stiles II and Barbara Alexander, and Bright Ideas Incorporation. We're so glad you could join us for this virtual tour. We hope you enjoy the show.
Paul Beanie is a printmaker. He is a mid-career artist who comes from Scotland. He studied in Scotland originally before going to Tokyo to study under Seiki Kenji, who is a master of woodblock printing. And after that, Beanie acquired a degree in Ukiyo, Japanese woodblock printing, in London. After teaching in Paris, Beanie moved to California to work here, and the two landscapes, the woodblock prints in the auction, are pendants. They are showing the exact same landscape, as you could see. The landscapes, the details are identical, but the lighting makes them look completely different. So one is a sunset scene and the other one is a moonlight scene. This is something that the Impressionists were really quite interested in, the different states of the same composition but taken in different light, which completely changes the whole disposition of an artwork. These are really quite wonderful prints. The one detail that I'd like to point out here, which is not obvious at the first glance, is a human figure. You could see it here and here, human figure sitting in the steps in an attitude of desperation, it looks like. But again, it looks completely different in a different lighting. Beanie has been recognized widely. His work has been collected by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, amongst other places. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful set of woodblocks bid. Maurice Broderson is a California artist. He passed away in 2011. He began drawing and painting early on, and his talent was noticed when he was a teenager. And that was happening during the time that he attended the Berkeley School for the Deaf. He had a hearing disability. When in 1970 there was an article in the New York Times about his work, the article actually took up the idea of how much influence this disability had or had not on his work, and the argument was made that with many artists who had personal struggles and health problems, including, for example, Van Gogh, it was something that played a role in the work. Broderson came to wider attention in 1960 when he was presented in the Young America show at the Whitney Museum of American Art. And the following year, in 1961, he had a solo show at the De Young Museum in San Francisco. The work in the auction is a felt tip pen drawing in two colors. It shows two figures in what looks like kind of an old-fashioned iron merry-go-round. and it definitely has some cubist character to it. The work dates back to 1958, which is in fact the time that he made the work which caught the attention of the Whitney curators and landed him in the 1960 show. So bid. James Gobel is one of the younger artists in the auction. He was born in 1972. In the early 90s, he studied with the art critic Dave Hickey at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and he inherited quite a bit from Dave Hickey in the way he approaches art. The main thing I would say would be his ability to combine the high and the low. Gobel works in a really interesting medium. Technically speaking, he's a fiber artist, but his work is also very, very sleek and very complex. So in a way, he defies the almost the stereotype of fiber work to create something completely new. The references that he uses in his work are really quite layered. He borrows from different styles, ranging from Baroque to Japonisme to pop art, and he was noticed quite early on. So after studying with Dave Hickey, he ended up doing his MFA in Santa Barbara, and just 1 year out of that program, he was given a solo show at the Hammer Museum at UCLA. The work in the auction, my predictions are the only thing I have. Has a very cheeky title, but it is no one-liner. It has multiple layers of meaning, which encompasses a reference to the first album of the Beastie Boys and a crude sailor joke, and also a reference to bear culture. We have felt, yarn, acrylic, all of this on canvas. It looks very, very sleek and almost minimalist, despite the fact that the artist uses quite a bit of color in it. This is not the first time Gobel's work has been shown at the Laguna Art Museum. In 2007, his work was curated by the same Dave Hickey in the famous Las Vegas Diaspora show, which traveled to the Laguna Art Museum. Leno Mars is a new artist to this auction. She's really quite interesting. Her sense of humor is a good match to that of Gobel. This is not something that is immediately visible in her work. She's very, very cheeky, but she's also very serious. In fact, her training began in her native St. Petersburg and back then the Soviet Union, at the State Academy of Art. When she moved stateside, she attended the Pasadena College of Art and Design and CalArts, where she trained with Baldessari and Jonathan Borowski. Mars is really quite unusual in what she does, because she is on the cusp of painting and graphic art. Her works are, technically speaking, paintings, but they are done in the graphic media. Their scale is very monumental, and yet the content is often very, very intimate. And then there's the question of the human figure. There are not many artists who are contemporary artists who are working with figures who are as certain in their ability to represent the human figure, but Mars is. At the same time, she understands that it is very easy to make a beautiful human body into a cliche, so she finds her ways around it. In many cases, she puts people in awkward poses or awkward situations. The work in the auction has a bit of that character. The piece is called Curtis, and it's a really fine example of what the critic Peter Frank called Maurice's ability to paint about the subjects and not just the subjects in to put it differently, it's an ability not just to represent somebody, but to let you know who they are and what they're up to. Again, here you see this, and this is Peter Frank's words, the offhand virtuosity which she displays. It's a beautiful work, and so bid. Fabia Panjarian is a young artist based in LA. She recently graduated from the Art Center in Pasadena, and in this auction she is represented by a painting, Purple Role Play, which shows really quite well the deliberate quality of her work. She composes, she crafts her paintings with great care, taking into consideration all sorts of things from color temperatures and their effect on the movement between patterns to the rhythm of line networks. Her paintings are actually really quite musical. She comes from a musical family, but she doesn't translate music directly into her paintings, rather thinking about recreating what she calls a visual sentience of music. It's a very good work by a young artist, and I hope you bid. This beautiful work is by Granford. He's a Northern Californian artist born in 1948. He graduated from the San Francisco Art Institute, and his work is in a way related to the light and space movement, because his primary interest is in light. He also, in his work, addresses the classical historic painterly abstraction. You can see he's using Barnett Newman zips and Morris Lewis's veils, and there's a bit of color forms of Rothko in it, so it's a nod to that tradition. But he's thoroughly Californian in his interest to light, as well as in his choice of technique. The work here is it's a pigment dissolved in polymer medium to translucent sheets of cast acrylic. And there are very, very subtle fluctuations in light on the surface, which are accentuated by the placement of the finished work. When you hang it in your house after winning it at the auction, the work should be tilted slightly, which will give an extra dimension to his investigation of light. Marco Sosoni is an Italian painter. He might be the most illustrious artist in the auction, because in 1982 he was knighted by the President of Italy, received the Order of Merit. 3 years earlier he had a solo exhibition at the Laguna Art Museum, and by then he has been living in Southern California for about a decade. He came here in the later part of the 60s, following the devastating flood that happened in Florence in 1966. This was also a very crucial point for Sosoni as an artist, because he was struck by the misery and the homelessness and the destruction that he saw in the aftermath of the flood. And in the subsequent years, it propelled him to paint and draw and take as his subjects homeless people in San Francisco, where he relocated. The two works in the auction are both landscapes. One of them is a Laguna landscape, the other one is a landscape of Emerald Bay. Both beautiful works, and both show how that interest for drama extends beyond the content of the paintings into form. So as you can see, it has both of these works actually, and perhaps Emerald Bay more so, have very intense, very energetic brushstrokes, which could be explained by the fact that when Sosoni trained in Italy, he actually trained with the pupil of the famous Austrian expressionist Oskar Kokoschka. The intensity and the drama of the brushstrokes in these two landscapes parallels the drama of the content of his earlier work on the homeless and the downtrodden. Rudolf Grossman is a German artist. He's probably the oldest artist in this auction. He died in 1941. Grossman came from a family of artists. His parents were artists, and when his career evolved, he was offered a professorship in the Royal Academy of Art in Berlin. That was in 1928, 5 years before a Nazi party came to power. Once that happened, Grossman was removed from his position. His art was gradually thrown out of all the museum collections, and he eventually was shown in the notorious degenerate art exhibition organized by the Nazi Party to shame modernism and everything it stood for, and that was in 1937. The work in the auction is a wonderful lithograph, which is hand-colored. It shows the artist's grandmother. This is one of my personal favorites. Bid. Thank you very much for joining me on this virtual tour. I want to wish you good luck bidding. There are many wonderful items in the auction. I only had a chance to speak about a handful, but please check Artsy site for more. And good luck bidding.